Now joining me now is Congressman Ron Paul, Republican from Texas, also a presidential candidate. Thank you so much for being with us here. You are a no vote tonight. Talk to me a little bit about your vote and what's at stake.
Well, I've been worried about the spending and the deficit for about 30 years, believing we'd get to this crisis. I've never voted for an appropriation bill because of that, other than some minor ones, believing that if we keep spending, the debt's going to be too big and we're going to have a crisis, so we're there. So the last thing in the world I would even ever consider is raising the debt limit so they can keep spending more money, because the expenditures what the problems are, and then the debt is secondary to that. But when governments spend the money, the people don't have the money. So what we should be doing is not talking about whether we're going to get a temporary reprieve and raise the debt limit and continue to do what we've been doing. We ought to ask, what should our government be doing? Should our government be the policeman of the world? Should the government be running an entitlement system which they can't afford? Or should we obey the Constitution and just live up to our promises? So I want people to start talking about that rather than the technical arrangement of adjusting for paying our bills, which is not the main issue, because the bills are going to get paid for. The big thing is they're going to pay with that money.
We did hear a lot of concern from the business community. We had a letter sent to members of Congress and the President today from CEOs of all of the major banks. We had another letter sent specifically to the House of Representatives supporting Speaker Boehner's bill from the Chamber of Commerce, from a number of industry groups. Are they wrong to be worried about August 2nd?
No, they should be. They should be worried, but they're afraid we might cut spending, and they're all on the dole so often. So many of them getting contracts from the government, and we should be cutting back on that. And they could be calling for the military-industrial complex. What if we changed our foreign policy and we didn't just build weapons? What if we took care of sick people instead? They would feel like, they might be losing out. So they do have an interest in perpetuating the status quo, but we need to change the status quo, because this deficit financing and big government spending cannot be maintained.
And getting back to this vote tonight and sort of the divide that we're seeing within the Republican Party, do you think that it's going to pass? Do you think that ultimately House Speaker John Boehner is going to win enough Republicans over to get this thing through?
I think there's no doubt that they will raise the debt limit, and we will go back to spending again. Whether it's going to be a vote tonight, if he calls a vote tonight, we're not absolutely sure yet. If he calls a vote tonight, he'll pass it. He won't call that up and it goes down. That doesn't happen. So he's working on a few more votes to make sure it does pass. But whether it's tonight or tomorrow, the next day, before August 2nd, because they have a lot of trips to make. August 2nd is more related to the month of August being off, because there's nothing magic about August 2nd. This is a bunch of fear-mongering going on, that the checks won't come to Social Security beneficiary. But what they ought to worry about is all of us getting checks and money that has less value. That is the default this country ought to be worried about.
Treasury Secretary Tim Geithner has issued a lot of calls of concern about that August 2nd deadline, but you're not buying it.
No, I think it's artificial. He's already $200 billion over the limits right now, and he'll get the increase. But they have to put pressure on people. They would like the technicality of the laws changed. But just think of what they did for bailing out foreign governments. They came out with $5 trillion from the Federal Reserve to bail out other countries and other banks. So they're not going to let anybody fail. We're not going to fail to pay our interest and take care of the bond market, but we're going to fail to protect the value of our currency.
And there has certainly been a lot of talk, though, about this August 2nd deadline. Do you see there being some kind of compromise bill, even if this vote doesn't happen tonight, even if this bill does not, House Speaker John Boehner's bill doesn't pass? What do you see happening in the next week?
It might be a short one, but they'll do something. Something will happen before August 2nd. They build up too much anticipation for this. So whether it's Obama would have to compromise and say, well, see, he wants it to go through the election, and people can see through that pretty easily, So, but he might have to say, well, get me something for 5 months or something like that, and settle some of these arguments some other day. But something will happen.
Do you think that Republicans have already taken a lot off the table, especially in terms of the tax overhaul that the White House was originally pushing for?
Oh, I think so, but, they haven't touched the issue, because nobody's talking about any spending cuts. There's not real spending cuts. They're just talking about the CBO increases. All these cuts are fictitious. So if they're going to give up some spending cuts, they're not giving up anything.
Now, this House Speaker John Boehner's bill, $915 billion. I know it is discretionary spending. Why do you say not real?
Because they're cuts from proposed increases, according to the CBO. So they've had these. There's no cuts in the next 10 years. It's all cuts in the proposal. If they were serious, if they if they said this is a serious matter, just freeze the budget from last year and you'd cut $1 trillion out. Just freeze it.
Congressman Ron Paul, thank you so much for being with here. One of the dissenters tonight, House Speaker John Boehner, needs 216 Republicans to get his plan passed. And again, we are still waiting on that vote.